The hook and the dangerous moment. The door clicks shut behind the last man. Los Angeles, 1938. Not a slam, not loud enough to draw attention. Just the sound of a latch settling into place, soft and final, as if the room itself has decided nothing here should ever leave. The office smells faintly of tobacco and fresh ink. A large wooden desk sits between three men who are not equals, though only two of them know it. Sunlight leaks through half-closed blinds, slicing the room into pale bands of gold and shadow. Dust hangs in the air, unmoving, like it's listening. On the desk lies a screenplay. Its pages are slightly curled, corners soft from handling, not the first draft, not the last, just close enough to production to matter. The man nearest the window doesn't sit down. He remains standing, hat still on, coat still buttoned. That by itself is strange. In Hollywood offices, especially here, men remove their hats, they relax, they perform cordiality. This man does not. Georg Gissling adjusts the brim only once with two fingers. The gesture is small, deliberate. He smiles, almost apologetic, as if he's about to ask for directions instead of dismantle a future. Across from him, the studio executive clears his throat, not because he has something to say, because silence at this moment feels heavier than speech. The producer seated beside the executive keeps his eyes on the script. He hasn't looked up since Gissling entered. His fingers tap once, then stop. He folds his hands, unfolds them again. No one speaks. Gissling finally steps forward. Slowly, no rush, no urgency, he places two fingers on the top page of the script as though testing the temperature of water. "May I?" he asks. It's phrased as a question. Everyone in the room understands it is not one. He flips the page, then another. He knows exactly where he's going. There is no searching, no scanning. His eyes land on a single paragraph halfway down the page. He reads it silently. The smile never leaves his face. Outside the office, typewriters clack, phones ring. Somewhere, a secretary laughs. Hollywood is very alive, just a thin wall away, but inside this room, nothing moves. Gissling raises his head. He doesn't name the line, he doesn't quote it, he simply taps the page once, gentle, almost kind. This, he says quietly, his accent soft, precise, carefully neutral, is problematic. That word lands heavier than any threat. The executive leans forward, trying to match the tone, calm, professional, as if this is just another note from another consultant. It's fiction, he says, the audience won't. Gissling lifts a hand. Not sharply, not aggressively, just enough to stop the sentence before it finishes. He maintains eye contact as he speaks again. In Berlin, he says, there are people whose job it is to remember names. They are very good at it. No one breathes. Gissling's voice never rises, it never hardens. He sounds almost embarrassed to bring it up, like a man apologizing for bad weather. There are also, he continues, people in the press, some of them here, some of them elsewhere. They talk to each other. The producer swallows. Gissling glances at him for the first time. A glance can be longer than a sentence, this one is. Careers, Gissling says softly, are delicate things. They move forward when nothing stands in their way. He smiles again, wider now, warm, friendly. And they stop, he adds, when something does. Silence rushes back in, filling every corner of the room. No documents are exchanged, no explicit demands are made. Gissling doesn't threaten bans or embargoes, he doesn't mention visas, he doesn't mention Germany's growing blacklist of actors and writers. He doesn't have to. The executive nods once, a reflex, muscle memory learned over years of quiet compromise. We'll take another look, he says. Gissling inclines his head in gratitude, a courteous guest acknowledging good hospitality. I appreciate your understanding, he replies. He straightens, adjusts his coat, and moves toward the door. Just before leaving, he pauses. One more thing, he says. Both men stiffen without realizing it. When changes are made, Gissling continues, please let my office know. I prefer not to be surprised. The door closes again, the latch clicks. Only after the footsteps fade does anyone sit down. The producer lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He reaches for the script, then stops, as if touching it now might somehow implicate him. Neither man speaks for several seconds. Finally, the executive reaches out and flips to the marked page. He reads the paragraph. It isn't inflammatory, there are no swastikas, no speeches, just a line of dialogue, a character calling another man a tyrant, a subtle reference to arrests, the kind of moment that passes unnoticed unless you're trained to notice it. The executive draws a pencil from his pocket. He hesitates. Then, with a single motion, he draws a line through the sentence. The sound of graphite scratching paper is louder than it should be. That's it, the producer asks quietly. The executive doesn't answer right away. He stares at the crossed-out line, as if it might bleed through. No, he says finally, that's the beginning. Outside, production schedules continue, casting meetings proceed, contracts are signed, Hollywood moves forward as it always does. But inside this office, something has shifted. Not because of what was demanded. Because of what wasn't. Because everyone in that room understands now that the story they thought they were telling no longer belongs entirely to them. And somewhere far beyond this studio lot, someone is waiting to see if the correction is made. The pressure, silence, and hidden consequences. The page stays crossed out. For a long moment, no one reaches for it again. The executive closes the script slowly as if speed itself might draw attention. He slides it into a leather folder the same way he would any other project. Same motion, same calm, but his jaw tightens when the folder snaps shut. This never happened, he says. It isn't an order, it's a statement of physics. The producer nods, he has already begun rehearsing the lie in his head. Notes change all the time, scenes are trimmed, dialogue gets softer, this is how films are made. This one just happens to carry a different weight. Later that afternoon, a junior writer is called into a smaller office down the hall. No windows, no explanation. The executive doesn't mention the German consul, he doesn't mention Berlin, he doesn't even mention politics. He points to a rewritten page. Studio thinks this line distracts from the story, he says, we're streamlining. The writer reads the page, he recognizes the cut immediately. But that's the point of the scene, he says, keeping his voice even. The executive watches him carefully. It was, he replies, now it is. The writer hesitates, just long enough to be noticed. Then he nods. Careers, like Gissling said, are delicate things. He leaves with the revised pages under his arm, telling himself it's only one line. That night, a telephone rings in a different office across town, then another and another. Not all of them ring at studios. Agents hear from foreign distributors asking questions. Publicists are quietly told certain markets might become complicated. A name is mentioned, not as a threat, as a concern. Trade columnists receive soft suggestions, nothing printable, just enough context to understand where stories might stop being welcomed. No one connects these events out loud. They don't have to. Within weeks, the pattern becomes familiar. Scripts are adjusted before they're finished. Characters become vague, political villains lose national identities, motivations are blurred, dialogue grows careful, too careful. A director asks why a scene was softened, he's told it tested poorly. An actor questions a missing speech, he's reminded of his contract. A writer stops pitching certain ideas entirely. None of this requires enforcement. Fear that has to announce itself is inefficient. The German consul's office doesn't issue follow-up demands, it doesn't need to. The machine now understands the rule: avoid embarrassment, avoid friction, avoid notice. The silence does the work. At one studio luncheon, a joke lands badly. A screenwriter, half-drunk, mutters something about dictators and cowards. A pause ripples around the table, not outrage, calculation. Someone laughs too loudly, someone else changes the subject. The writer doesn't get another assignment that year. No one tells him why. By 1939, executives begin using a new phrase in meetings. International sensitivities. It sounds benign, professional, almost responsible. Entire story arcs disappear into that phrase. Not just German references, not just Europe, anything that might provoke, anything that might invite scrutiny. The cost of being brave suddenly feels very measurable. One studio memo circulates quietly, never filed, never archived. It advises caution on foreign portrayals. it doesn't cite a law, it doesn't name an authority. It doesn't need to. On the surface, Hollywood keeps producing musicals, romances, comedies, escapism, laughter. But certain absences become noticeable to those looking for them. A war brewing overseas remains unnamed. Brutality is implied, never shown. Villains are fictionalized into shadows without flags. The truth isn't banned. It's diluted. And dilution is harder to fight. Behind closed doors, some executives resent it, a few even rage about it, but not during meetings, not in writing. Complaints are whispered in hallways and forgotten before they reach ears that matter. Others see opportunity. If one consul can apply this much pressure with a smile, what else can be avoided? What other risks can be smoothed away before they become inconvenient? Self-censorship becomes policy without ever being declared one. Meanwhile, Georg Gissling keeps smiling. He attends premieres, shakes hands, sends polite letters, congratulates studios on their successes. He doesn't mention what's missing from the screen. He notices anyway. When a film opens overseas without issue, his office sends compliments. When a name is absent from a credit list, he does not ask where it went. He doesn't have to. Those who complied find doors open. Co-productions become easier, distribution flows smoothly. Those who resist notice delays, paperwork lost momentum. No public punishment. Just inertia. And inertia is deadly in an industry built on speed. Some artists begin to understand what's happening, truly understand. But by the time that realization forms, they are already inside the system that benefits from forgetting. Silence starts to feel normal. By the end of the decade, the crossed-out line from that script feels unimportant compared to what followed. It wasn't the erasure itself, it was the proof that nothing dramatic was required, no shouting, no force. Just a reminder that names are remembered. And that careers only move when allowed to. Then quietly, the world outside Hollywood stops pretending. And the people who once smiled politely begin doing much worse things far away. The studios notice too late that by the time the truth becomes impossible to soften, they've forgotten how to tell it without asking permission first. The realization, fallout, and haunting aftermath. In September 1939, the tone changes. Not in Hollywood offices, not right away. The change happens first on radio dials and newspaper front pages, borders violated, armies moving, names that had once been avoided are suddenly unavoidable. War has begun. Inside studio conference rooms, men gather around radios the way they once gathered around box office reports. This isn't abstract anymore, it's not a foreign complication or an international sensitivity. It's headlines, it's maps, it's reality pressing in. Someone finally says it out loud. We can't keep pretending. But by the time the sentence is spoken, it lands without force. Too much has already been practiced, too many careful instincts have been trained into place. Scripts are still being adjusted. The habit doesn't disappear just because the circumstances demand courage. Habits never do. When American sentiment begins to shift, some studios scramble to catch up. Suddenly, films want to sound bold, defiant, clear, but clarity feels unfamiliar now, risky. The language of conviction has grown uncomfortable in mouths trained for caution. Writers who once hinted now struggle to name. The damage isn't visible in a single memo or cut scene, it lives in hesitation, in drafts that stop themselves, in bold ideas softened out of reflex. A few people remember that meeting in 1938. They remember the smile, the tap on the page, the polite warning that never sounded like one. They don't mention it publicly. They don't need to. The memory surfaces whenever someone suggests pushing further than feels safe. Let's not invite trouble, someone says. No one asks whose trouble. By the time the United States enters the war, Georg Gissling is gone from Hollywood, the office is shuttered, the dinners and smiles disappear. But the influence lingers. That's the part no one likes to talk about. Not because of shame exactly, but because it exposes something uncomfortable about how easily power works when it understands human fear. There was no law forcing compliance, no police presence, no overt command. Just access. Just consequences. Just the quiet understanding that progress could be slowed, names could be whispered, paths could close. Hollywood likes to imagine itself as loud, defiant, fearless. The truth is harder. In this moment, it learned how easy it was to compromise without ever signing an agreement. After the war, questions begin to surface. Not accusations, not trials, just uneasy reflections. Articles hint at how carefully some studios behaved, how silent others had been. Executives dismiss it as pragmatism. We were protecting the business, they say. Some even believe it. Others carry it differently. A director, years later, admits to a friend that he never made the film he wanted to make, not because he was stopped. Because he stopped himself first. A writer drinks too much and talks about lines he never wrote, stories he buried before anyone could ask him to remove them. These confessions don't reach history books. They live in conversations that end abruptly when someone enters the room. The real consequence of that smiling meeting in 1938 isn't a single erased sentence. It's the normalization of erasure itself. It's the lesson that danger doesn't always arrive shouting. Sometimes it arrives courteous, well-dressed, and patient. Sometimes it waits for you to do the work for it. Long after the war ends, Hollywood becomes paranoid about influence, about pressure, about ideological threats. Ironically, that paranoia hardens into new silences, new loyalties, new lists. The pattern repeats. Different faces, same mechanism. Fear does not care about the flag it waves, only about whether it is effective. And what made it effective in that room wasn't hatred or brutality. It was professionalism. The meeting had ended politely, everyone left with their dignity intact, no one raised their voice, no one could point to a crime. That's why it worked. That's why it lasted. If you look closely at films from that period, you don't need a censor stamp to see what's missing. Absences tell stories too, so do softened edges, so do villains without names. Hollywood didn't betray the truth all at once. It learned to trim it. And trimming is easier to justify than cutting outright. The most unsettling part is not that a foreign power influenced American film. It's how willingly the industry adapted once it learned the cost of resistance. The smile was enough. The silence did the rest. Even now, when historians reconstruct the era, that meeting barely registers. A footnote, a mention in correspondence, a minor incident compared to the horrors that followed overseas. But systems don't begin with horrors. They begin with moments like this. A quiet office. A polite visitor. A single line crossed out. And the realization too late that the cold in the room wasn't caused by what was said.